Thank you. And welcome. We didn't expect such a large crowd. As you can see, we weren't quite prepared. This is a meeting of the Bandon City Council workshop, a work session. This is a work session of the City Council discussing homelessness. The public is invited to attend or view the meeting on Zoom. As a work session of the City Council, the public comment section will be limited to a total of 20 minutes, with each speaker being allotted a maximum of 2 minutes. Time limits will be strictly enforced to ensure that there is sufficient time for the City Council to conduct the work session. Speaker forms should be completed and submitted at the beginning of the meeting because speakers will be called upon in the order in which the forms are received. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Tori, do you want to give us the presentation?
Sure, thank you. Could you all hear me? Thank you. So for today's work session with the City Council, we are discussing the topic of homelessness. And of late, we've recently seen an increase in visible homeless persons within the vicinity of Bandon, primarily in the Old Town area and the surrounding region. So with that, I will provide you with a brief overview of existing laws that set the framework for an ordinance that the city has adopted. We will then provide the general public here in attendance an opportunity to provide comments to the City Council. And hopefully after that, we'll have sufficient time to break out into a discussion about homelessness here in Bandon. So if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. So as I briefly mentioned, there has been a number of complaints that the city has received primarily during the better weather of homeless individuals that are plainly visible and in sight. They have set up an encampment or are seeking a place for shelter, and that has caused some concerns for the local residents here who have referred those complaints on to the city. As indicated here, under current conditions, the cities don't necessarily have the sufficient resources or funding to deal with homelessness. Homelessness is a social issue that cities are ill-equipped and prepared to deal with. These issues are normally dealt with at the federal, state, and county level. However, with the delegation down, this responsibility is becoming more of that of the local municipalities. So with that, there is very little funding that's available to cities. As I mentioned, we're not trained or equipped to deal with homelessness. The city, nevertheless, was required by state law to effect an ordinance by July 1, 2023. So in advance of that deadline, the city enacted an ordinance that governs or regulates camping within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city. Is indicated in looking through the budget, we don't have any specific funding earmarked for addressing homeless issues, nor do we have staffing or available staff and resources to deal with it. At this time, the calls that we receive, they're being responded by the local PD. And as you know, there's a lot of other issues that the PD is faced with in addition to dealing with homelessness. And the city, through its ordinance, does not have a designated area for the placement of a shelter or campsites for homeless. Next slide. So this is the legal framework. There's federal laws that govern this. There's also state laws. And as I just referenced, the city has its own local municipal law that it has enacted. Next slide. So the Eighth Amendment governs the majority of the direction that is handed down to states. In addition, there are two specific cases, Martin versus the city of Boise and Blake versus the city of Grants Pass. And this is case law that set the precedents and established the requirements for cities to address homelessness. Next slide. So the Eighth Amendment, as complex as it could be, I'll distill it down to the Eighth Amendment specifically prohibits government from punishing an involuntary act or condition such as homelessness. So what they're trying to say is that government should not be in the act of punishing involuntary acts such as conditions that are beyond the control of these individuals. Next slide. So with the case Martin versus the city of Boise, there has been some issues here. Let me scroll down, get my slide here. So this date was, or this item, this court case was issued in September 2018. It was heard by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And what it established is that so long as there's a greater number of homeless individuals within a city than there are available beds for shelter, the city cannot punish homeless individuals for involuntary sitting, lying, or sleeping in public. And again, this is case law. Specifically, the case challenged the city that essentially criminalized homelessness. And as a result, the court issued findings that strictly prohibit that moving forward. The next case, if you wouldn't mind moving forward, is Blake versus the city Grant Pass. In this particular case, the court upheld that the city had the ability within its municipal laws and authorities to implement and establish restrictions such as governing where homeless individuals and where they may place their belongings in the sense of camping. So with that, they have established the abilities for cities to establish camping ordinances. And in some cities, this includes banning the use of tents in public parks, limiting the amount of bedding and materials that are collected by homeless that are within this designated area that they consider a campsite. It also allows for cities to enforce municipal laws and regulations that are designed to protect the health and safety of the general population, such as laws against littering, public urination or defecation, obstruction of roadways, pedestrian access, possession or distribution of illicit drugs and substances. It also prohibits harassment or violence that's exercised on homeless individuals. So with the court's ruling, the judge reminded city officials that were present about the importance of empathy. The court also encouraged cities to protect their most vulnerable citizens and not to forget that homeless individuals are citizens just as much as those fortunate enough to have a secure place to live in shelter. Next slide. So Senate Bill 315, in response to the two cases that I just briefly referenced, there was legislation that came out, and the first is SB 3115. And in this particular law, which I'm going to reference my notes because my computer's not working. Yes, this law was enacted in 2021 by the Oregon State Legislature. It established that cities could consider establishing their local ordinances within the available context that local shelters and services should be considered as a measure of providing and addressing the needs of homeless. It also allowed for cities to establish regulations pertaining to sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry. And they also required that this be objectively reasonable. Cities are permitted to enact regulations relative to time, place, and manner exclusively, thereby allowing cities to effectively manage public property for the benefit of the entire community. The court's rulings essentially established that it is not illegal for one to sit, lie, and sleep or keep keeping warm or dry outside on public property, and that if such regulations were to be established, they would be objective in nature. Next slide. So there are requirements if and when a city is to enact a municipal code or an ordinance. There's specific provisions that require that there be adequate notice given to the person. And the idea is that they would be given a 72-hour minimum notice prior to the city requiring them to be relocated and or for their items to be removed from the location. It also is explicit that the notices have to be placed in all access points that are used to gain access to the location. Now, there's exceptions that are provided, and that's when law enforcement or the city suspects that there's criminal activity or there are some violations of law, ordinances, or our own municipal regulations that are occurring. And or if we feel that the general health, safety, and welfare of the public is threatened. Next slide. So with that, there is also a requirement for cities, if we were to remove any items from a homeless encampment or an area that is being utilized by a homeless individual, that we are required by law to contain and maintain the personal belongings for a period of 30 days. And that has been reflected in our ordinance. There is the ability for the city to discard things that are considered to be trash, debris, or that don't have any personal value. There's also the requirement for any weapons or stolen property that's found at the encampment to be assigned to the police department. And that is the case in which, you know, our police officers are required to go out on site and secure the information. It also includes valuable items over the expense of or value of $1,000. And for this, there's no site here at the city that we have established that is readily available for the storage of these items. So this may very well require them to be stored off-site in a secured location, such as a storage facility within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the city abandoned back in June of 2023 established an ordinance, and this was the result of extensive public outreach and participation by city staff and the elected and appointed officials here at the city. It effectively regulates camping on city-owned property, including public rights-of-way or parks. It establishes objectively reasonable regulations, and it finds that city parks are intended for recreational purposes and not to be made available for camping. It establishes that public areas lack access to sanitary accommodations, such as in the public right-of-way, proper trash receptacles, and out of concern for the public health and safety and prevent unsanitary conditions, this warranted the establishment of an ordinance such as the one that we have in place today. There's also a humanitarian component of the city's ordinance, and it is intended to meet the legal and humanitarian standards that are applied to all people, including individuals that are experiencing homelessness. It does not criminalize the act of being homeless, nor the act of sitting, lying, or sleeping, or keeping warm and dry on public property. Instead, the city's ordinance establishes reasonable time, place, and manner regulations that balances the rights of people without shelter to use public spaces to meet their basic needs, while managing public spaces in a way that ensures that public resources are available for use by all residents. It goes on to detail additional specifications and provisions regarding temporary shelter. It goes on to require that a minimum of 500 lineal foot distance is maintained from childcare facilities or schools. There's exceptions to that, but they're very limited, and that no more than 3 vehicles, if they were to be permitted on a privately owned property for temporary shelter purposes, the site should not be able to accommodate more than 3 vehicles. And it goes on to lengthy requirements and responsibilities of the property owner. It also provides for the authorization to be revoked at the discretion of the property owner or the city for reasons such as those stated previously, such as the suspicion of illegal activity being conducted on site. In accordance with the law, there are public noticing requirements, and I briefly touched on those. But upon identifying a person that's staging in a location where temporary shelter is not permitted on publicly owned property, after the initial notice of that, there's a 72-hour requirement that we have to provide to the homeless person to encourage them to move along. And the minimum distance requirement for them to move is a block or 600 lineal feet, whichever is more restrictive in those instances. So the idea is to not allow for an individual to set up camp for an extended period of time in an effort to maintain the character and quality of those specific areas where overnight camping is not permitted. And this also helps to encourage individuals to seek more permanent shelter. As I mentioned, the city's ordinance does not identify a location within the city that is a designated shelter or a campsite. We do partner with local cities in the adjacent communities, specifically that of Coos Bay, in which there is a regional shelter that we participate in. Oftentimes, our law enforcement personnel will approach the individuals and offer assistance, including transportation to that facility. But as I will let them attest, that's often refused because the individuals would rather prefer to stay locally here in the city for whatever reason that may be. There are provisions that address the ability for the city to revoke any kind of administrative approvals for private property owners to stage transitional overnight parking on their properties. And in accordance with the state law, our provisions are designed to address time, place, and manner. And I won't get into details there. You could reference the ordinance. I know we had copies of that that's available if you'd like to review that. But with that, you know, at the end of the day, the city has an ordinance in place that has been designed and developed to meet the legal requirements that local municipalities here in Oregon are required to comply with. And with that, I will now turn the agenda back over to the mayor and see if she'd like to open the work
June,
session to comments or questions.
yeah, should we, Chief, do you want to speak, or shall we let the public speak and then have the chief speak?
It's completely up to you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure the public's gonna have a lot of questions.
When-
I apologize for being late, but my handcuff pouch is empty, if that tells you why I was late. So, I kind of missed.
I think what the bottom line is here is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that you can't cite someone for simply sleeping in public. In the past, you could, they could be vagrants, whatever, but the law took that away from the local jurisdictions. And unless you have a specific place for them, then you can't just go walk up and cite somebody. And as Tori said, we have not designated a specific place. We did have some problems a few months ago down on the gravel lot. 2 or 3 people were staying and the chief worked on it. He did a marvelous job, but as Tori said, chief offered to take them to Coos Bay where they could get some help and they refused to go. So it made us a little less sympathetic to their plight when they had an opportunity to be taken somewhere and they refused. So I think, how many people do we have signed up to speak, June?
I just have one card. Are there more people that have signed up? I just have Gary and Nan.
Okay,
We didn't necessarily want to speak, we were just gonna speak if someone had something to say about veterans that were home.
oh, okay, so Nan, you would just respond then if something, okay. So does anybody want to speak for a couple of minutes? If not, we'll start, you guys can hear our discussion as we meet with the ministers in the school district and the hospital and the police and the council and the planning, and many of the planning commissioners are also here. So
Madam
Chief,
Mayor, yeah, if we could just have a quick update from Chief Dillon on the status of homelessness. I know
Sure.
in the fall it was kind of,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's a couple of things that kind of, as you were going through there, that sparked my interest that I wanted to speak about. First of all, I did invite Officer Coleman from Coos Bay Police. His job in Coos Bay, he's the community resource officer, and he solely deals with homeless. He was gonna be here, and sort of like me, he had some problems arise. He's actually on his way. He'll probably be walking through the door in like 10 minutes. So he's a great resource for some of this stuff. A little bit on the veterans side, as we were talking about the House Bill 3124, when we talked about emergency exceptions. In my book, disabled veterans, I think they fall into the emergency exceptions, and we tend to work with them a little bit more when the problem arises. If they're a disabled veteran, I'm gonna go the extra mile and not necessarily, be so hard and run them out in the 72 hours. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Which parts didn't we hear? Okay. And then, as it was said before, we haven't designated a specific spot for a homeless camp per se. I think probably the biggest friction we get with that is reasonableness. Nobody wants a homeless camp in their neighborhood. So it's extremely difficult to try and find a location. I think over the last couple of years, we've had a couple ideas, and every time we propose them, understandably, that community speaks out and says, not in my neighborhood, which is hard to argue against. So if we ever do find a spot that we can use, that the community can agree on or the city can agree on, it does give us a little bit more resources as far as removing them or taking action. And it's important. One of the things to understand is it's very important to understand these are ordinances. Okay, the punishment for an ordinance, if you don't know the criminal justice system, is a fine. What I was just dealing with was handcuffs and rolling around on the ground with the guy because he committed a crime. That's different. If what he was doing was an ordinance, I could give him a $50 ticket and be on my way. That's what the majority, probably 95% of these ordinances and things we've talked about, the punishment is a fine. So, and I think this is where the public gets frustrated. They're like, why aren't the police doing anything? Why aren't the police doing anything? For the most part, literally all I can do is go up and hand them a piece of paper, say, here, you owe me $50. If they don't know where their next meal's coming from or where they're sleeping that night, they're not super concerned with a fine. So that gives the illusion that we are not doing anything. And I understand and I apologize for that frustration if that's the optics of the situation. So we typically, it's almost a waste of time to try and find one of these people that's violating. We try to work with other entities in the community, like Corey said. We almost always offer them a ride to Coos Bay where there's several homeless resources. And in 7 years here, I can think of maybe 2 people who've agreed to do that. And then you kind of run into the logistical part of oftentimes right now we have one officer on. So does that one officer take the homeless guy at Ray's and drive him all the way to Coos Bay and be out of the city and leave the city unprotected for an hour? We are working on the manpower thing and we will have it fixed here in a couple of months, but for the past amount of time, that's been a big issue. Do I take my one officer and take him all the way to Coos Bay to get rid of a subject who's, committing a city ordinance violation? So it's kind of triage law enforcement, and we have to weigh the benefits of that. We just had our count. I forget what it's called. You were involved, weren't you, Marissa? Was there an actual number because I was out of the state at the time. Do you know what the number was, or does anybody know?
Bruce County, with a software problem, but we were at 548 firm, possibly 600 and people.
Okay, 500 to 600. Do you know how many were abandoned by any chance? Yeah, I mean, I would guess we have between 10 and 15 on average day during the summer. I think that population swells. I think this past summer, we had probably, since I've been here, the worst summer in recent times as regard to camps and problems and, you know, using the bathroom and all the problems that we deal with. So well, when he comes up with his numbers. So that's kind of where we're at right now. My proposal that I kind of put out a couple times in reference to the homeless camp, which I think every time someone says that, everyone goes, you know, because they don't want a homeless camp in their community, which I understand. And I think the whole part of this work group is to try and come up with creative solutions. One of the solutions I had, and I will throw it out there again, because I feel like it's worth considering, is working through the local churches and acquiring some of the like pallet homes or the pallet homes that are in Coal Bank Village. It's like the homeless population's tiny little house. Maybe acquiring a couple of those and placing them at the several of the local churches. That way we have a resource that gives us more teeth to our enforcement. And you don't have a large population of them together, which is where kind of the ickiness or the crimes that go with a homeless camp come from. If you have one at this church, one at that church, one at that church, they're kind of spread out. There's the hero I was talking about, just walked in. So, you didn't clap when I walked in. Jeez Louise. So,
Mike up there.
that's a general kind of consensus. Sarge, you were involved in the homeless count. Do you recall off the top of your head how many were ballpark?
Pretty significantly rainy day.
Oh, yeah.
But, that morning, I believe we contacted, prior to your arrival, there were 4. About the resources in the area that we were up, the Restoration Worship Center, that they had some resources up there for the day.
I threw out 10 to 15. I don't know how long you've been sitting up there. I threw out like 10 to 15. I feel like about 10 to 15 constant homeless, right? And then they kind of, with the seasons, they blow into town and blow out of town.
Yeah, there's currently 10 individuals in town, with 2 of them as Port Orford as their main residence, but they come here for panhandling.
Right, okay,
So there's 8 right now.
okay.
Chief's correct, in the summertime, that probably anywhere from doubles to triples.
February of 2023, there was 20.
Whew. So, yeah, that was left over from our, we'll call it the summer of tents
23 on the official count for this.
in Bandon. Wow, so I was not accurate. 23. That's more than I realized. But again, I think there's an ebb and flow to that number. I mean, we deal with every day we contact homeless people. And a lot of times it's the same people over and over and over and over. And then, you know, we get a new guy rolls into town, he's here 2 or 3 days a week and he rolls out. I have no explanation for why that is. And we work with Red Cross to give them bus passes to try and get them out of town. I mean, that's like our go-to, generally speaking. We contact someone like, you know, once we get the vibe that they're gonna set up camp somewhere, we're like, hey, where are you trying to get to? California. Sweet, come to the PD, get a bus pass. And a lot of times that solves the problem, but that's probably sadly our biggest resource right now,
Right.
bus vouchers. So,
Chief's introduced a lot of good ideas. He's kind of honest about it, but we have supplies in our patrol vehicles, everything from bottles of water, small medical supplies, granola bars, things like that. It's not just get out of our town. We're trying to help them with resources, and bus passes are some of them, correct? Getting them, if they're trying to get somewhere, we may not be able to get them there, we can get them on their way, you know, closer in distance to it, so.
Can you please read that?
Darren, what's the rough population in Coos Bay, just to give a perspective?
I think Eric could probably give a better number than what I can.
Sorry. So,
substantial, I can tell you that much.
I'm sure it's more than ours. I just kind of, and how many, pallet homes are in Cold Bank Village?
Currently, right now, I believe our number is 22 pallet homes right now. We're getting ready to hopefully expand with the money that the Devereaux Center is trying to move over to that area so we can put another 20 to 22 homes back there.
Wow, so you're gonna double the
We're trying
population?
to double, yes.
And I assume those are constantly filled?
They are. We use them for kind of our transitional housing. Some of those folks, I think Eric has your number for you.
400 some sheltered and unsheltered.
400 sheltered and unsheltered in Coos Bay.
Quick add of a lot of numbers, but.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot more than I would have guessed, but that, so that's my state of the union on homelessness, I guess. Did you have more, Madam Mayor? Or does you want to open it to questions or?
No, well, if anybody in the audience wants to speak, now we're giving them an opportunity, but I think they need to fill out a form, but we'd be happy. But if anybody at the table, if they have anything to add to the conversation, that would be great. Are any of the churches doing anything, for example, to address the problem at all, or?
Obviously, we have things like survival bags, which you referred to, Sergeant, where we distribute to the homeless people survival bags. And we are obviously very involved in the Good Neighbors distribution of food, but that's not really serving the homeless population. It does a few people, but because of the lack of them to keep something that, a place for them to store food, it's not really an effective.
Sure.
So besides the food and the survival bags, which we actually give away quite a few, Mary Carol, I mean, do you have any estimate about how many?
I can say we've quadrupled in the last year the amount we're going. And I will get some of them over to the police department because I didn't know that for your cards, we have some great survival bags.
Oh, okay.
So we'll
Yeah.
get some over to you.
Our cars are pretty loaded up with a lot of gear, but we could, we could make,
Drop off one and see if you want them.
yeah, I mean, we could, I'm sure we've done a major overhaul and cleaning of the PD lately, and we have some storage room, which circle back to something Tori was saying, as far as confiscating their property in the event that we have to condemn a camp. We actually do have a small amount of room in the old fire hall. We just had like 2 pickup trucks worth of, I think Madam Mayor referenced the bad camps there in the gravel parking lot that we had to condemn and seize, and we filled a couple of pickup trucks worth of property and held on to them for 30 days. But then, again, it's a resource problem. We had to hold them in the fire hall, and they're very unsanitary. And then after 30 days, we have to go pay to destroy them. So, that's just another little logistical problem we deal with. But, and Counselor was asking if you're going to speak, just identify who you are, because not everyone can see your name tags, I guess. So.
So that was Jim Vickery from First Presbyterian Church of Bandon. It's
First
Jim
Presbyterian
Vickery,
Church,
First
the
Pres-
pastor.
And we have a very limited physical plant, so we don't have a lot of room for, to house.
Jim, maybe speak into the mic. These mics, you've got to get, I don't know, well, if you're gonna,
It's about ready to pull it out.
not already under the carpet here. I don't know what happened there, but anyway.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yep.
But I know there are some churches that have some more property available, and I'd be interested to see if there's been any thought as to, whether or not other churches could provide, had some real estate that could accommodate that kind of issue. I know that ours is, downtown, is shortly outside of downtown, so there's not a whole lot of room.
Right.
And we don't have showers or things of that nature.
Right.
Do those pallet houses have showers in them, or is there a community shower? That's something I didn't really consider.
It's a community shower that's, it's actually sponsored by Advanced Health, paid to have it. It's like what we use at the fire camps, those style showers. But it's plumbed directly in, because of the way the village sits, it's plumbed directly into city water, and sewer, so we don't have to worry about being portable. But they have, I believe it's 3 or 4 showers, with 2 of them being ADA friendly.
I am curious about, from Coos Bay, the Devereaux House I know is very active. Is that a public or private venture or a quasi public private?
She's a nonprofit, so it's all public. She has a board of members that oversees everything. She's been doing a lot of work groups with the city council members, both from North Bend and Coos Bay, as well as the county commissioners, trying to make sure she stays completely transparent with everybody. And she is 100% open to anybody that wants to take a tour of the place. I work with her a great deal. I mean, she's my resource that I lean on for a lot of the stuff I deal with the homelessness stuff.
There was an article yesterday, I believe, in the World that said she had gotten a sizable amount of money. How much?
Put in for 600 million,
And
I
she,
think, to combat homelessness. Talking about.
I'm talking about Tara Johnson
Oh,
from,
no, I'm sorry.
from the Devereaux House.
I was, my mind was well,
Thinking of
as
the-
he was talking, Governor Kotek put in.
Yeah, I was
he
thinking
earmarked like
The,
600
the
million.
one that he's referring to is the
Yeah.
Devereaux House, and that's Tara Johnson.
Okay.
And I think she got a sizable, more than $1 million, I believe. And I don't know if they're going to do a relocation. Do you know if that's true?
Eric Sherman, project manager for Homeless Response Office. And yes, 1.5 million for the city to purchase what is now known as the First Building. Sorry, I don't know the address, but it's connected to Colbank Village.
Okay.
So the location of the Devereaux Center will move from where it is to there, and then be able to add more pallet shelters and expand Colbank Village.
That's great. That's great. She has done, I wish we had a Tara Johnson here in Bandon. It could be any of us, but I don't think we're stepping forward. But she has taken a lot of criticism from the community because the kind of people that she attracts are not necessarily as concerned about hygiene and junk. And she's taken a lot of, but she struggles on, and she is a tremendous person. And I know a lot of us in this room have donated sizable amounts of money to her because we feel that we're not doing anything really from a personal standpoint. And we know that somebody is doing something, and we try to support her. Jerry.
Madam Mayor, I agree with everything you've said. Many years ago, I made a donation in person.
Jerry, bring the mic up, clear up to you. These mics are not very sensitive. You gotta.
Many years ago, I donated some things to the Devereaux Center. I don't even know if it was called that at the time, and it was a mess. People were all over the place. Non-compass mentis. However, I was in there recently, and I agree with you, she's doing a marvelous job, and everybody was working with her. And also one other thing, I know some people in the audience, and they've approached me over a period of time about the problem with the homelessness. I suggested they come to the council and ask questions. So far, none of them have asked a question. So I'm letting them know now, don't ask me anything when you see me out in the street. You have your opportunity.
Chris, did you have, oh, excuse me. Oh,
Madam Mayor,
stand up. Maybe we'll have a better chance of hearing you. Oh, can she speak?
right here, still at the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Don Con, Faith Baptist Church.
Can you turn the mic on, please? Thank you.
How's that?
There,
Better.
thank you.
As Officer Chief Dillon mentioned, the churches, the need for them to step up and get involved in this. Before COVID, our church helped probably 60 people come into the area who wanted to help themselves, wanted to improve. We were able to let them stay at the church. They found jobs and got into homes. Since COVID, we've helped a number of people, and all we've got out of it is people who they have no desire to improve their life. And we've hauled literally a couple ton of trash away after they left. So for the churches, you know, who's going to welcome that?
Oh, yeah.
So part of my idea and I know it's a lot to ask of the churches, and I don't even know if it's feasible. But I was just trying to think outside the box, and my idea for the churches was the city would draft some sort of understanding where we could assist with power, electricity, and sewer credits or breaks in the bill, and maybe trash response would be something the city could assist with. Again, I'm not speaking. Tori's probably over there clenching his fist, going, "Shut up, shut up." But it's just an idea I've kind of floated out there. Maybe we could assist with some sort of utility credits or utility breaks to help if you were to sponsor one of these pallet homes. So I'm just trying to think outside the box. I mean, because what we've been doing, heck, what every city in the nation's been doing isn't working. So
Right.
I have a minute.
Yes, and be sure and give your name and address.
Carol Stangy, 1284 Jackson Southwest. And I know Coquille, small town, came up with designated areas for tents that it's like downtown, it's just like a 6x7 spot. And it had to be set up at a certain time and taken down at a certain time. And I don't know if any, I know there's homeless up there as well, and I don't know if they utilize that, what the city has offered or not. But they did find these little spots around town. So that might be an option for Bandon to look at. It's mostly downtown though, where,
well, that's speaking to my point.
Mhm.
We can't get anybody to agree on a spot. Do you have a suggestion?
I don't.
Okay.
Maybe, just say, I'll throw it out there. I haven't thought about it, but there's a big driveway outside the fire station. I'm assuming that's city property. Maybe on the downside of that, there's maybe a lawn
Are
area.
you gonna propose that to Lanny Boston?
I don't know.
I want to be there when you do.
Just,
I'm sorry, I'm not going to make light of this.
and then I know, but, and also the city was working with some churches. I believe, they came up with because the churches were in residential neighborhoods. They asked that the churches have certain things such as a fence set up. So that the neighbors, that are in that area aren't having to see this, and it also controls where these people go in and out of, so they're not just out wandering through the backyards. They actually have driveways and have to use these sidewalks. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because Coquille went through this as well. So
Okay, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Nan?
Yeah, my name is Nan Sands and 54213 Brittany Drive is not in the city. And I was also asked to be here to represent Pacific Community Church, which is also not in the city. John Simpson is recently taken on the position as pastor for our church. And unfortunately, John's mom passed away, so he wasn't here to be here today. But John is a missionary and he's very interested in working with the homeless here in Bandon. And if anybody knows where our church is, it's south of town and we have quite a bit of property. And adjacent to our property, John's father lives. They actually donated the property for our church. So I don't know what John's plan is, but I know he's very anxious to work with the city, with homeless. It's his heart. So like I said, he's not been involved that long, but I know he wants to, that's his heart. So something may be in the works. We've got the property. He is not even living on the property. He's living here in town, but he's got some plans in his head. So he just asked me to bring that forward for right
Good,
now.
appreciate it.
And we'll see what his thoughts are, but
Okay,
he just couldn't be here today.
thank you. I do know that the Episcopal Church in Brookings has made the national news because Father Lindley has decided that he's going to feed the homeless, I think 5 to 6 days a week. And they're in a residential zone, and it began to cause so much problems for the neighbors that they petitioned the city. And the city told him that he'd have to have a permit. He refused to get a permit. All the other churches in town who were feeding did get their permits, but he decided he wasn't going to do that. So he continued to keep feeding them on every day. And the city brought him into court or sued him or whatever, fined him. And then they contacted the Bishop of Oregon. The Bishop of Oregon got involved. Now it made the national news last week. showing that what the Episcopal Church says is that it's their duty as a church to feed the homeless, feed the hungry, and they are going to continue to do it, and they are continuing to do it. And of course, the city's point is that if you're in a residential zone, there are certain ramifications of being in a residential zone. So we're gonna have to wait and see how that plays out. I don't know if it's going all the way to, I don't know where it's going to end. But they are continuing to serve the public and the homeless, and yes, they are in a residential zone, but that's, do you have any, Father, Doug, do you have any opinion on that or knowledge?
I'm Doug Hale from St. John Episcopal Church here in Bandon. First, I would just say that the story's a little more complicated than that.
Well, I have all the articles that have
So,
ever occurred,
I
but
mean, you know, and you can blame COVID on part of that. But yeah, so it's an interesting thing about trying to sort out what freedoms churches have.
right.
And also being concerned about the sensitivity to residents and how that thing. So, you know, thinking about our church here in Bandon, we have a little bit of property, but we're in a residential area. We're across the street
From a
from a
school,
high school.
yeah.
I suspect for us to do something would not be very popular. Though certainly our hearts are there, but you know, to get community buy-in on that would,
Yeah.
and that's part of what's going on in Brookings is that not in my neighborhood kind of
Exactly.
attitude.
Exactly.
And I mean, part of it was also a breakdown in what was going on there before COVID. And a lot of feeding sites shut down. And so the Episcopal Church there picked up the slack.
Yes, he did. There's no doubt.
So
about
that was part of what was going on. So anyway, it's not, the choices aren't easy sometimes.
Yes, you want to address?
Yes,
Could you give your name and phone number or get a name and address? You don't need your phone number.
Bob Schroeder, 3159 Lincoln Avenue, Southwest.
Yeah, I guess we'll see you tomorrow night too.
Yes. But what I wanted to do was share a interesting storyline about what one of the other cities did. And this is Wilsonville,
Okay,
Oregon, and it was related to, I believe there was like funding that the state was going to take away from the cities if they didn't provide, you know, a homeless area. Does that sound familiar?
mhm,
And so, and our daughter has a condo in Wilsonville, pretty close to City Hall area and everything, but they came up with a creative solution. They had a kind of a grassy area adjacent to the City Hall area, and they put up a few trees as kind of a buffer, and they put in a porta potty, and they said, okay, this is your homeless site. But basically, you can spend the night there, but you need to leave by
Exactly.
8 AM
yeah,
the next morning. And so it created a venue to basically get funding and actually provide a site. But every time I've been up there, I've never seen anybody there.
really. Oh, that-
Because the
good.
issue is, once they get there, they just want to stay there in the trash and everything else. But my guess is the police or somebody goes by at 8 in the morning and checks to see if anybody's there. So I just thought it was pretty creative.
That is a creative idea, but I do remember that a similar thing happened on the gravel parking lot. And yes, the police, the chief himself went down there. And what was he to do when the guy says, I'm not leaving? And he had trash everywhere. And over again, he said, I'm not leaving. And you know, it's because Coos County doesn't even have any jail. We have 48-bed jail space. So you know they're not going to jail. The district attorney's not going to prosecute a case of somebody lying in a parking lot. So people have become aware of this. They understand that there's really no leverage.
Mhm.
So, but where you're talking about maybe being next to City Hall, maybe they felt like they probably were near the police department. Maybe they felt
Or
like,
perception.
yeah, the
that-
perception of that they had better.
Somebody's watching. them,
Exactly,
And
exactly.
it solved the problem, and there hasn't been any, like I said, I've never seen anybody spending the night there.
I guess one thing that the public, we would need to ask the communities, let's say we have 10 or 12 here in the community. All right, would you rather see them in different areas of town? A lot of them really, they're not in your face. They're not trying to cause problems. And sometimes you don't see them at night. They come out in the morning, maybe they go to the laundromat. So would you rather see that, or would you rather have all 12 of those people congregated in one place in your community, which is essentially then becomes a tent city? And I think the perception would be that you had a much larger problem if you had everybody congregated in one small area than if you just drove through town and you might see one here and one over there at the shopping center and one over at the Restoration. I guess that's the kind of thing, Chief.
Well, I was just kind of, as you're talking, that's, I'm trying to figure which is better. And I was gonna ask Darren, in the actual camp itself, how much crime or dissent takes place in the camp?
Are you talking about Colbane Village?
Yeah, like once you congregate them, is there?
We have a very strict set of rules that's set forth by Tara and the Devereaux Center that they have to abide by. There's a curfew at night they have to be in at. She also has a full-time employee that's there. One's day shift, one's night shift, and one's the graveyard shift that watches they have to have, if they're in after curfew, they have to have a reason, like they're coming from work. But as far as any kind of crime, that's been, as any of you guys have watched any of the news lately, the moving of the Devereaux Center over to Lockhart has created quite the hornet's nest. A lot of the folks that live over there didn't even realize the Colbane Village is there. That's how little of an imprint it makes.
Okay.
It is a very safe, secure place.
So I'm glad I asked, because as we're talking about consolidating them, I'm just picturing, fights and.
Me too.
issues. But if you're saying it, I mean, I guess if you draft the ordinance or the rules where it's not.
And a lot of them know too that to get in there, it's a waiting list. And so once they get that opportunity to get in there, they don't really want to mess with it too much. It's a safe place for them to sleep. It's a place that they can keep their stuff. So it starts to give them that sense of stability. They also are kind of required to go through engaging in programs and starting the work down the road of getting off their feet or back onto their feet, so to speak. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that Colbane Village. And kind of going back to what Madam Mayor said there, she wished she had another Tara. So Tara partnered with Florence, the city of Florence, to put up a village up there that's running very successful up there. She's willing to branch out and help. If you guys are looking for help, she is one that she sees this as, I mean, it's her county, not her city. So it's the whole county, and she's willing to put forth effort to help those that are, I actually talked to her this morning, told her I was going to be here at this meeting and asked to put her name out there. And she said, absolutely. She's willing to listen to anybody, help anybody. If you guys are looking at the faith-based community for that, we're also doing that up in Coos County or Coos Bay right now. We're working with some of those folks as well. But if you guys are looking to kind of start your own small village, even if you have 5 or 6 shelters, that's a huge.
Do you happen to know what, off the top of your head, what one of those pallet houses cost?
The urgency of pallet shelter, inner walls and whatnot, again, Eric Shermer, $7,500 a shelter.
$7,000, and that houses one person?
They can double up.
There is also grants available for those that
Yes.
the governor pushed out to us that we need to be relying on. Not throw them under the bus, but Advanced Health is actually funded part of our Colbane Village as far as the showers and stuff. There's a lot of grant money, and that's where Tara is able to, she is on the grants, a lot of stuff, because a lot of stuff she does is grant based. I mean, there's a lot of money that's wrapped up in this that she does a lot of grant writing for or looking at grants. So there's plenty of stuff out there that where you're not footing the bill yourself of, $30,000, $40,000 just for the shelters themselves.
And Chief, our office can also offer grant writing services.
Oh, wow,
So-
okay.
But she also has 2 full-time employees?
Yeah, she has
One
what,
on, one graveyard,
3.
Great.
There's somebody at the gate at all times to watch. They log when they come in, come out, watch what they're doing. And she runs it pretty tight in there.
All right, thank you.
Shall we, are you waiting to speak? There. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Sheila Howe, and I'm here representing Holy Trinity Catholic Church. Father Anthony wishes he could be here, but he had a prior engagement he had to be at. So I want to share what we're doing at Holy Trinity. also share maybe some of the challenges we've experienced at Holy Trinity, and also maybe perhaps put out an invitation to network as an interfaith and ecumenical community in Bandon to collaborate and perhaps move this forward. At Holy Trinity, we have a lot of people come looking for services. We're on the days that we are open. And what we do is if they need gas, we send them to the police department. I did not know that you had bus vouchers too, so that's good to know. McKay's, we give them a food voucher for McKay's, so they go to McKay's. And then for housing, Father Anthony will put them up at Shooting Star. I don't know if anybody realized that Shooting.
How deep is that well?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure what
Maybe
that
I
relationship
didn't know
is.
that was a thing and,
Yeah, and it's usually 24 hours, maybe
okay.
48, but it gives them housing, kind of very temporarily. We've also housed people down at St. John's in Port Orford and at Holy Trinity when there's been fires and there's been some homeless individuals. And we worked with the Red Cross down at St. John's to provide shelter during that fire that was just recent. The biggest challenge I have seen is with families. We had a family come through as domestic violence situation. She had a baby, she had a couple toddlers. She was, incredibly distraught, very traumatized, and scrounged for resources. There are no shelters available. There were no beds available. And that was a very, very difficult situation. So these temporary houses, the need for having that networked or those networked resources for families, because I think we're going to see that more and more, right? And then when you have a domestic violence situation, you have a lot of mental health considerations as well. So I do think kind of creating this wonderful holding environment or network in Bandon with the churches, with an interfaith perspective, from a ministerial standpoint, I think could help some of that, because then it'd be other resources, other phone calls, that kind of thing. So I'm on the pastoral council at Holy Trinity, and one of our pastoral plans is to create a ministry of presence that will minister to marginalized homeless. And so that is part of our pastoral plan as well. So would love to network and intersect with the other churches. And the fact that there's land there, I think there's an invitation there. There's an opportunity. We have the Knights of Columbus. They're great, right, for building things. So there's resources. So I think the more collaborative, the more successful the church thing is going to be. But thank you to the police department for providing.
Before you escape.
Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah.
I just had an idea.
Okay.
9 out of 10 of them are bad, but so I'm interested about your church putting up people at Shooting Star. That's very admirable. And I'm wondering if you would be willing, till we get this program rolling or whatever we decide, I don't know if you know, but government can move slow. If you would liaise with the other churches and consider some sort of consortium like for paying for a room, and maybe we could use it sparingly. I'll tell you right now, I've put up people in the Shooting Star at my own expense before who were just literally, 2 a.m. the single mom that's running from an abusive, there's nothing. I got nothing, and so it'd be nice to at least have some sort of resource or system. Like if we could set up some sort of consortium, like right now, if I call a tow truck, I ask dispatch, non-preference 1219. It's whichever one is next on the list. Like if we had 3 or 4 churches who are willing to pony up for a room, and we could use it sparingly. I mean, this doesn't happen often, but maybe it'd be at least a resource right now. Be like, okay, this church is up next. They fit the bill for a room for 24 hours. And then, 3 months later, the next church pops up on the, we need, I don't know if that'd be something you'd be interested in liaising with the other churches and looking into.
I think.
And then getting back to us. I think that would be.
Absolutely. I think too, if there's other hotels. That want to, comp some of these rooms.
If you send them to Shooting Star, usually they leave afterwards, so.
What did they say?
Out there.
The seagulls get them, right?
Yeah.
So if there are other private business owners that own some lodging, that would be awesome too. But anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila.
Can I add on to Sheila's comment
Yes.
there? First of all, I do believe, we had an active, as I understand, ministerial alliance previously before COVID, and it's kind of
Falling
dwindled
apart, yeah.
since then. But so I think getting the ministerial alliance back together again to discuss issues like that. We also have worked with Shooting Star. The problem that we see sometimes in the, hotels is that they want the church to be responsible if there's any damage. caused.
Yeah, and that's been a serious problem.
Yeah, I personally have responded, well, not necessarily the church, but the damage to the rooms that.
Yeah.
So.
So writing a check for the night is probably the least of the concern in that.
But if we could filter it through the police department.
Yeah, if we came up with some sort of waiver.
Yeah.
That says the church and the, I mean, I guess we have to talk to Shahab too and see if he would be, or the other hotels, whichever hotels.
And then we've kind of grouped these two issues together, which is food insecurity and housing. But there certainly is a lot more collaborative work that we can do on the food insecurity piece without having necessarily resources.
Yeah, and I can't speak for all the officers, but food is, I don't know if that's as big an issue. Like one of the first questions I usually ask them, have you eaten today? And if they say no, then we have the vouchers for McKay's, or I don't know how many times I've thrown a 20 on the counter at Subway and said, hey, when this guy, so we tend to make sure they're basic human needs as far as food and water. Like Sergeant Whitmer said, we have water bottles.
Sure.
We dole out water, MREs and food quite frequently. So,
Well, so if
long-term food more than, I guess that's more of a concern, but in the short term, we generally, when we contact them, make sure they're fed, whether it's out of our own pocket or the truck, whatever we have in the truck.
So we also give to, the McKay's cards and the gas cards and things of that nature. But if there's a central source where the police would be willing to kind of be a gatekeeper for some of that, relief, that would be helpful.
Yeah, tomorrow we're having the first Bandon PD meeting, in I don't know how long, and I think we're gonna designate a homeless officer that can really crack down on this. Do you want to volunteer?
I vote. Go ahead.
Could I jump in once?
Well, I'm wondering too, if the city of Bandon, we have what's called revenue sharing. And a lot of different groups come before us and we've never considered a group like this. But I would think that we could at least put the seed money in maybe up to $5,000. And, that would go quite a ways for a night. I don't know how much it costs at Shahab's, but, if you had a base to start with, and then maybe some of the churches, I think if people knew, if we put a concentrated effort out to let people know of the need, I think if we put an address and somewhere people could send a check, I think you'd be surprised how many people, even in this room, would answer the call. But it's right now, they don't know what to do. There's no concentrated effort to let people know. What do you think, Peter?
I think Jim has a comment. We have a couple more people.
Oh, I didn't know you were waiting to speak. I thought you just didn't have a place to sit. Go on. Come on up.
Well, you were about to add a comment?
Well, I was just gonna say, Jim Minkler from Seabird Chapel. I've been at the church now for 23 years. And I can tell you that there are many churches in this town that do way more than put people up. In fact, I don't know of any church that has done more than Faith Baptist, Don Kahn. They rallied around people, that whole congregation. They're right on 101s. They're on the front lines, especially during the summertime. But we have gotten a lot of people at our church as well. And we've put up people multiple times, different hotels. We've had hotels say no more because of
the damage.
Yep,
that's the problem.
So we have to rotate that way. But in all the years I've been doing this, we've even purchased a trailer for someone. We have gone trying to find jobs, and I know like Dawn has done that a lot, other churches as well. The real work is in rallying around the people who are willing to receive help. We as pastors, churches, we become this, we've got to be psychologists, and okay, are they telling truth or not? And they'll call our church and I'm sorry, we just put you up for 2 nights last week, can't do it again, so they'll call the next church and the next church. But I can tell you, you have churches, this is why we are here. We're here to love on people in the name of Jesus. But most churches here are very small. I know
Right,
we have a
they
small
are.
congregation, and it takes a lot of money to pour into that. So that, it's not that the desire is not there, but there's been so much work going on that no one knows about that the churches are doing. We have property, we have 5 acres off of Seabird, but we have had to pull back. We used to allow people to stay on our property, park for a couple of nights. I even put someone up in a little shed, work, set up electricity just to give them temporary shelter. Then we got them a hotel. But we have a school now, a tutoring school, Monday through Friday. And so we cannot, we can't mix kids with that. So there's so many challenges. We want to help, but we are being taxed all the time. Just
Right.
so that you know.
Well,
Jim.
and one of the issues I think we need to think about is raise your hand in here if you're homeless. Oh, well, you know, nobody in here is homeless. So, oh, you have for someone. Okay, awesome. So I think we need to take a hard look at what they want and talk to them. We're all sitting in here trying to decide their futures. And I will put it out there that we probably need to come up with a questionnaire or get as many of them together as we can and find out, look, no BS aside, do you want help? Do you want to get out of the situation you're in? A lot of them are probably going to say no, but if we can pick out the ones that do want to clean up, do want to go to therapy, do want, you know, work assistance and focus the resources on them as opposed to throwing a whole bunch of resources at, you know, people who may not want them. I think that'd be a little more productive. It's, you know, something to consider. I don't know what that would look like. Maybe some sort of town hall where we invite all of them in and feed them and just talk to them and offer them ministry services, offer them rehab, offer them a ride to Coal Bank Village if Theron can get us a spot or.
That's what my job is, I'm a community resource
Yeah,
officer.
I mean, just something to think about.
Backing on that.
Okay, well, should we let her, she's been standing.
Yeah, let's do it. Hold your thought and let's try and get these people who have been waiting.
Yeah,
for.
let's,
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte Carver on 370 Delaware Avenue Southeast. I also work for the Regional Early Learning Hub that serves children 0 to 6 in Coos Curry, Coastal Douglas counties. We've been hearing about the issues of homelessness, housing across the whole region. We also know that this isn't a problem that's unique to just Bandon. It's really a widespread issue. I really appreciate the conversation so far today that I've heard and the attitude that law enforcement has had and like really being very compassionate and understanding of people who need help. And I appreciate the solutions that have already been proposed. I think that this community is really like ready to respond. I don't necessarily think that the city is in a position to solve homelessness, but to be a part of the conversation is really helpful and provide help. And when possible, to prevent homelessness whenever you can is something to, I think, really keep in mind. Another thing that's really important to remember is homelessness is a very complicated issue. It is not just one type of person that's experiencing homelessness. There's a lot of reasons why somebody ends up homeless. There are a lot of families with young children in this community that are homeless and across the region. I just looked at the most recently available data. School districts collect information on children who are considered homeless. In the last school year, I believe there were 6 children in the K-12 population that were considered homeless, unsheltered, and then 11 that were considered doubled up homeless. So living in unideal living situations. You can't tell if somebody's homeless by looking at them. There's going to be a lot of people that live out of their cars. They have jobs, they want help. They can't find a place to live, or they're living in an RV on somebody's property. We're going to need different solutions for the different problems that are causing homelessness. We also know addiction is a major reason why some people end up homeless, especially people who are homeless for long periods of time. And mental health is obviously an issue that is definitely a contributing factor. there's a big benefit to having a resource hub where people know where to go when they have questions. But I also think that we need to have different approaches for the different people with their specific needs, like families experiencing homelessness. I'd love to see a separate place for them to go for help rather than where people with serious mental health issues or addiction issues are going. Another thing I would recommend looking at is, yes, pallet shelters or housing is going to help, but there are other things that we can do, like a warming shelter when it's freezing outside, and where it's literally can be life and death. Having a place where people can just go and spend the night and then find more information about other resources so that they could go to for the next day. Last year, when it was extremely cold outside, there was even some people that died in other parts of the region because it was just so cold and they were sleeping in their cars. So those are a couple of things I would suggest. Also, I love the solutions being proposed about the churches in this community, and I think pulling together resources is going to be a really good idea, especially if each church can think about which part of the piece of the puzzle they want to try and help solve. Having a nonprofit involved is going to open up new opportunities for funding. There is a lot of funding available, but there's a lot of requirements associated with that funding, and having a nonprofit could help. In Reedsport, they have a ministerial association where all of the churches come together and they pool together their resources, and they can actually, they talk to each other to see, okay, I had this one person, he came to me and he's coming back over and over again. So maybe we come up with a plan for where to refer them so that they're not exhausting, one person is not exhausting all of the church's resources. So those are different ideas.
Thank you very much.
I think she's right. It's hard to paint with a broad brush. Are there families or like people with children? How does that rest, for instance? Sorry to cut you off.
No, we're working with the South Coast Gospel Rescue Mission. That's something that we have identified. I've run into that problem as the community resource officer. I had a mother with 2 children. A lot of times the rescue mission will separate males and females. So if you have a mother with a son, she doesn't want to send her son into the male pod by herself. So the Gospel Rescue Mission is working to get a family unit up and going. We do try to reserve some of the pallet shelters. If we have a family emergency needs, we try to get them in there at first. But it's again, pulling on a lot of resources through Terra. We've used hotels before. It's one of those situations where they're all unique. We definitely come across them, and it's just, it takes a lot of creative minds to handle these or tackle these problems together. And that's, I think we.
And you said the biggest pallet house was 2 people? Or is that?
Of the ones that we've got, you can get larger structures. The Salvation Army in Coos Bay has also got a project going to build 8 tiny homes specifically to house families. But you know, groundbreaking is maybe in the spring. That it takes time, right?
No, she's right. I mean, a couple of shelters here and there wouldn't. So I have run into, a dad sleeping out there at the marsh with his kid in the car, and he was there for 2 or 3 weeks because he was working, but he didn't have anything. The kid would get frustrated and run away. There was like 2 pit bulls, dad and an 8-year-old boy sleeping in a Toyota Corolla. And I mean, all I could do was get the kid, feed him Subway and take him back. And, that was the limit of my resources back then. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Joyce Pell, 2682 Cedar Loop. A lot of what I wanted to say was just addressed, and also by yourself, Chief. One of the things the conversation's been wonderful, but what we can't forget is to go to the end user and what do the people who are dealing with homelessness want? Like it's not one of those, if you build it, they will come.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've worked with homelessness in another state before I moved here in depth. The one thing I do like that Oregon does, or the term they use isn't, I hear houseless more than homeless, because some people who are houseless do not consider themselves homeless by choice. So I think just getting to the end user and what are the wants and needs there, and then how do we pull together to meet them. So thank you for this forum.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So our point in time count that we just conducted, the numbers that I pulled off the computer here, do not include a lot of the people affected that we count through the schools. It does not include people that are doubled up. Okay, the HUD has a very different definition of homeless than, say, the McKinney-Vento, which is the one the schools use. And so if we talk about those families of people, our number is much higher.
Okay. I wish there was some way to really find out how many families are, particularly families where one or maybe even both of them are working and they can't afford to live here. I mean, we have a huge problem. I think the average rent, I just saw an article the other day in Bandon is like $2,200, or that's the median rent. I'm sure that's not, but that's what it takes anymore. And you have to have first and last an address. Some of these people don't have an address. I suggested some months ago to the former city manager, when we got, each city and county got a lot of what was called ARRA money. It was COVID money. And some places got, I think we got $600,000 or $700,000. And I was wondering if we could establish a fund where we could pay somebody's first and last month rent to get some of these people who are in our community into a home. And if they're working, they might very well be able to pay the rent. It's just so impossible to get in. And I'm just wondering if somebody couldn't, maybe like Tara Johnson, couldn't help us write a grant so that we could have seed money for that. And we would go to the schools, for example, and find out about the families. And maybe we could work specifically and get some of these people into housing.
One of the people, just to let you know, she'll probably be mad at me for bringing her up because she doesn't like to speak much, but Marissa has worked a lot with the homeless community, along with Chief and I, and out of the goodness of her heart. She's not from a foundation. We worry about her a lot because she goes out there by herself, but she's pretty strong. She works very close with them, and she can attest to a lot of the difference of the types of people
The need.
in the situation and the needs that are needed by that community. And so I hope she'll speak a little bit about it.
Well, hello. Well, I don't like public speaking, but here I am. My name is Marissa, and I am a mother of 3 little children in this community. And last February, I noticed one gentleman that was freezing during the snowstorm, and I got to know him, and that led into making weekly hot meals for the community. Originally, the group was at Oddfellow Cemetery, and they were there for a good 6 months, very quietly, and no one knew about their existence.
In the county.
And then I would make my way back there with daily, I got involved with Restoration Church, who was not here to represent themselves, but Lori from the food pantry would often give me resources, and I connect up with the group anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. I provide food, snacks. There are other people in this community that are quiet about it, but they'll give me blankets and hygiene bags and shoes. And I work with Larry over at the thrift store by the South Coast. It's called Dangerous Heels. And Larry will just let me come in there and pick things out for individuals. Like I need size 9 shoes. I need this. I have people in the chamber that call me up and say, hey, come get this for me. So pretty much the back of my truck is loaded with resources, and I drive around and I provide whatever they need. Usually it's snacks. I'll give canned goods, packs of noodles, snacks whenever I see them. And these folks, I know them well. I know all of them. My name, I know their stories. I know one has 11 children. I know what put them into this life and how they're dealing with it. I'm an emergency contact for one at the hospital. I've driven one after an overdose, after he almost died. So I'm close to the community. I know them well. I do know that a lot of them are very appreciative of the things that I get, but I have noticed, I've been doing this for a full year now. I have noticed that it's kind of expected from the community that's left here. Some are very, very appreciative still, but others are like, hey, I need a new tent. Can you get me one? And I know that I see them panhandling, and I know there's money, but I also know this individual is into fentanyl and alcohol. So he's choosing to spend his money on that versus resources. So he's relying on me to get those resources for him. And of the individuals that are still left here, I do know that there's a couple, and They're not married, but they both have opportunities to get help, but they cannot go together. And that is, this woman has 11 children. And she really, yes, young to old, and she doesn't want to leave him, but they won't separate. So in their case, they won't take the help. Some of the others, I know the one that I originally started helping, he has an 18-year-old son and he's thinking about going back to his ex-wife. But he is really heavy into narcotics, and that's an issue there. I know that people were talking about doing a community. They lived fairly peacefully, 10 to 15 of the individuals over at Oddfellows for almost a year until the sheriffs came and I had to come and move them with my truck. And then they were moved to Fillmore. A couple of them were moved to Fillmore, and then some locals between 18 and 22-year-old individuals decided to trash their items by throwing fecal matter all over their supplies. One individual's had a dead possum thrown at her as she walks down the 101. They have been shot at with guns. They have been attacked. And I told them that this was going to go on, and they wanted their voice. I guess they wanted you to know that they're not all bad. And they, most aren't bad. And they said, please stop putting us all in the same bubble. We are individuals, and everyone says the homeless are bad. They're all drug addicts. They're all users. They're all mentally incapable, but they're not. And they wanted you guys to know, example, they got me birthday cards. Okay, y'all, they put I love you in here and sweet notes. I don't know where they obtained these, but something about a rat's butt or something. I don't know, but funny things. These people there's good people out there. And in regards to resources, I can't even fit my kids in the back of my truck anymore. I have to take my van because I have a box of food. I have a box of clothing. And when everyone's talking about providing resources, y'all, they get them. They get them. I see Rays. I know where their camps are. I know where they're located now. I do not share those spots because, privacy for them. And the Bandon folks haven't been too nice to them. And they really get attacked, and they're good folks. So I guess
Frequently they're victimized. They're victims of crime, everything from sexual assault to assault, and they won't report it because would you say it's fair to say they have a negative opinion of law enforcement? Because we deal with them every day. We run them off of this property, run them out of that property. And 90% of the time we're responding to a call. We honestly don't go trouble them unless someone calls and complains. So naturally, they probably think ill of us, and they don't bother to report these crimes. You feel that's accurate?
it is.
For the most part, they think probably they see us as their enemy because every day we're yelling at them, get out of here, go get off this property, get off that property. And so, yeah, that's something to keep in the back of your mind as to the other, I forgot the other lady's name that, there's all different kinds of them, everything from, controlled substance to, just a single mom that's down on her luck. So.
Jim, my question is, what's the condition of the woman with 11 children? Where are these children being taken care of?
With family. There's no children on the streets.
They're what?
With family.
She doesn't have custody.
Oh, thank you.
No,
Yeah, I could envision 11 children living out in the woods here.
No. There's
Okay,
no
she
children.
doesn't have the children.
There's only
Okay.
2 females, the rest are males right now. And in regards to putting everyone together, this community did fairly well at Oddfellows with 10 to 15. However, as you know, there was domestic calls between them that someone came out to, and they also had some reports of fires during the off season. And there is a ton of crime within their community.
No,
They
that's-
will steal. I'm taking one of them to the hospital after he overdosed, and someone came in and stole all of his stuff while he was gone. And there's even speculation that they'll overdose you on purpose to steal your stuff. So there's issues within their community where there's no trust and there's a lot of theft. So our particular folks that are left in town here, would they do well together? No, not this group.
That's what Chief was referring to when he wondered if they should all be in one place in some kind of a camp. And I think you're right. That
And it's one of the reasons they'll
Things-
balk at resources is because if everything you own is in a shopping cart in the woods and you go to Coos Bay to see a doctor, see a mental health professional, and
Right.
you get back, your stuff's gonna be gone.
Mhm.
No, it's a different life. It's a different, it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around the problems they have, but they do have problems.
Oh, come on up.
Everybody sees me now.
Well, we were gonna start out by having people sign up and then they were gonna give me the little cards and I think that went by the wayside. So go ahead and speak, please.
So my name is Misty Golden. I don't have an official address. I have a mailing address. I'm one of the only people in the room that raised their hands when they said, are there any homeless in the room? So
Okay.
we're gonna start a homeless task force and you guys want to ask questions. My story is real. In 2011, I was on my way home from a job interview and a young woman was returning from college and she was texting. So she didn't stop. When I turned left, she did not stop and that changed my life. The back injuries that were done that day on December 14th, I'll never forget it. It changed my life. And it introduced me to the restrictions of disability. And to this day, I don't qualify for disability because I'm too young. And so I'm gonna try really hard not to cry. I don't think it's gonna work.
Sounds like you've earned a good cry.
Well,
I'm not trying to be funny.
but now I'm houseless. I am lucky enough that I have been able to work some and I took that money and invested it into a vehicle. So I now have a vehicle, which it comes with its own problems.
Right.
When you have $1,000 transmission repair, who's going to pay for that? So, but in that instant of that car accident, when she hit my car so hard that it bent the frame on my car, it bent my frame too.
Right.
So I have lived every day since that day in pain. And that makes it hard to work, So I work until I can't. And then I'm out of work for a while until I can get back to a level of my pain being tolerable enough to go back to work. And so it's kind of this just ongoing.
So are you basically living in your car or do you have a place to
I am
live?
fortunate enough that I have family that is helping me right now.
Okay,
And that kind of comes and goes with its
sure.
dynamics. But I've heard several times in this conversation, like, let's just build a fence. Let's just plant some trees. Let's just come up with a place south of town where we can't see them. And like you said, we're individuals. You could never tell by looking at me that I'm a
Right.
person, could you? Ever. But that is because I am determined to do something different. That is because I haven't given up yet. But there have been a lot of times where I've wanted to give up.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've traveled all the way down to Arizona to work, only to get there to find out that it's not what it was said to be. I've come all the way back to Oregon. And like with this homeless shelter thing, like I've been offered to stay at the Devereaux Center, but I don't want to be on drugs. I'm not on drugs. I don't want to be surrounded by people who
Yeah,
are on
I
drugs.
understand.
So it's just, there's a lot more to this dynamic,
Yeah.
the whole picture than it's just somebody on your screen that's living underneath a blue tarp. I honestly have to say, my heart breaks for that person. Like, what level did they have to come to be willing to sleep on a concrete slab under a dirty tent, under a dirty sleeping bag?
Sure.
Like, so that's why I just decided to finally be brave and talk, is to let you know that like they are all individuals and there is something that happened to them. There's a story.
That's
behind
right.
What happened to
And I
them
think that's what we're hearing
to
today.
kind of take. And if there is going to be, like, I hope that we walk away from this town hall meeting today and we come up with like a homeless task force. Because it's not going away. It's not going to.
You're right.
It's like, it is so much deeper. You talk about rent. It's not just about rent. There are 2-bedroom apartments available in Reedsport for $1,500 a month. The caveat is that you have to make
Three times.
$3,875 a month working part-time on minimum wage at McDonald's.
No, it's,
The problem is deeper and that's why, you know, I do encourage you to have this lady here specifically and the lady in the back there, specifically, like if you have a homeless task force, is start like asking those deeper questions, like
sure.
what brought them there?
And I think one of the things that we've talked about here today, there are quite a number of ministers here and people representing the ministers and the priests. And I'm hoping that they can reenact the Abandoned Ministerial Association, because for many years, the years that I worked at the paper, say in the 70s and 80s, they were very, very active and worked very well together. And I think some years back, they had a little fracture, and it's time to get that group back together, because each one of them does a lot, and it helps to know what the other one's doing, I think. So I think we plan to have this until 3 o'clock. So now if there's anybody from the council, did anybody from the council want to weigh in?
I just want to thank the lady that just told us her story. I want to thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and excuse me, I think you segued nicely into our next steps. Certainly conversations with reorganizing the ministerial groups and talking about what assets your organizations have to bring to bear. I think the idea of a task force and kind of shrink the group down to be able to talk about how to actually help combat this problem would be a good next step as well.
Anybody else?
Nothing?
Okay, well, we appreciate this has been we should have more meetings like this where we have a lot of workshops as a council, and sometimes the council and the planning commission, we don't really have a lot of community involvement. I think this has been very good, and it's good to have the players at the table. So thank you, and
Wait.
One more comment back there.
oh,
Before we leave, you know, Cory is big on action meetings. So I would like to see us leave with one action step. And I have a proposal that maybe one of the city council works with the ministry. Because we can't leave this meeting and say, it's up to the ministry now, and we've done our meeting. We had a meeting, obviously a lot of people are interested in this topic. So I would like to see maybe somebody from one of the churches, somebody from the city council, lead and get it going.
well, I think first we need to get the ministerial association back as a viable group, and then I think that's a good idea, Christine. Then
That would
we
be
can, yeah.
But Marissa, I want to thank you for all the work you do for the homeless. You're an
Yes, that
amazing
sounds
woman.
like, yes,
I
you
didn't
are.
even know you existed. I would love to get your information.
Great.
I
It's
checked
got-
my information.
It's got a point where we call her and text her and like, do you know where this person is? Or do you
Great.
know who this person is? And she typically,
You are
she's a
amazing.
resource for the police
Yeah.
department.
I try to hide.
We try to get her to become a reserve officer and
Yeah.
hasn't worked yet.
All right, well, thank you, and hopefully that you'll come to our, well, not tomorrow night, that's a whole different thing. We'll have hundreds and hundreds, there'll be hundreds on here, hundreds in here, and that's the perk development hearing tomorrow night.
Wait, is it?
Thank you.
Here or is it? Oh, okay.